Ladies and gentlemen, have you ever truly sat in silence? I mean real silence, the kind that doesn't beg for distraction or demand an explanation. Silence where you're simply there, present, whole, without any need to impress, to conform, or to explain yourself. That kind of silence is rare, isn't it? And yet it's in that silence where true security begins. We live in a world that worships noise. Relationships, followers, likes and applause, they all form a cacophony that drowns out the quiet voice of self-awareness. It tells you to be loved, you must be seen to be secure, you must be surrounded. But let me ask you this, does the crowd really see you? A man with no friends or just a very small circle has found a secret. Not a secret of rejection, but of reflection. Such a man walks alone, not because he's abandoned, but because he's found the richness of being alone. To stand without leaning, to walk without following, to speak without needing an echo, this is freedom. You see, most of us are bound. Bound by the need to belong. Bound by the fear of being misunderstood or unloved. But the man who has stepped out of that binds himself to nothing and no one. He doesn't cling to the crutch of validation. He knows that his worth is not something anyone else can bestow, it simply is. And here's the paradox, this man may have very few companions, but he is never lonely. Why? Because he has befriended himself. He has discovered that the mind is not a trap, but a temple when visited without fear. He has found joy in the quiet, where the rest of us only find discomfort. This man has no need to please or to perform. He doesn't chase fleeting moments of connection for the sake of filling a void. Instead, he fills his days with meaning, not obligation. He moves through life with an ease that comes only when you've let go of the weight of pretending. It's not about shutting people out, it's about no longer depending on their presence to feel whole. And in that space, when such a man chooses to let someone into his circle, it is not out of need, but out of genuine connection. There is no fear of loss because he knows that his value doesn't diminish in the absence of others. So the next time you find yourself alone, don't rush to fill the void. Instead, sit with it, feel its texture, listen to the quiet, and perhaps like that man, you'll discover that what you thought was emptiness is actually fullness. Remember, security doesn't come from holding on to many, it comes from letting go of everything but yourself. Silence is the gateway to security. True security begins in silence, where one learns to exist without external validation or distraction. The illusion of the crowd, being surrounded by people, doesn't guarantee understanding or fulfillment. Often, the crowd does not truly see or know you. The power of solitude, a man with no friends or a very small circle discovers the richness and depth of being alone, free from the need for external approval. Freedom from validation, true freedom lies in letting go of the need to please others or seek their validation. Self-awareness as a foundation, befriending oneself and embracing the mind's quiet moments transforms loneliness into peaceful solitude. Joy in the quiet where others see discomfort. In solitude, the secure individual finds joy and meaning. Connection without dependence, genuine relationships arise not from need, but from authentic connection, free of fear or obligation. The strength of letting go security is not about holding on to many people, but about releasing the need to depend on them for self-worth. Wholeness in presence, the man who walks alone finds wholeness within himself and no longer relies on external factors for a sense of completeness. Embrace the void. What seems like emptiness in solitude is actually a space of fullness, offering clarity and self-discovery. True security begins in silence, a silence that is not simply the absence of noise, but a profound stillness within. In a world constantly clamoring for attention, where every moment is filled with the hum of notifications, the chatter of social obligations, and the pressure to be on, silence feels like an act of rebellion. Yet it is in this silence that we rediscover the essence of who we are. When we step away from the external noise, we confront something many fear: ourselves. Without distractions, there's no audience to perform for, no external yardstick to measure up against. In that moment, we realize how much of our lives have been dictated by the need for validation, be it the approval of friends, colleagues, or even strangers. Silence strips all that away. It forces us to sit with our own thoughts, to examine the things we often avoid. And through that examination, we uncover something extraordinary. We are whole, complete, and enough just as we are. We no longer need the applause of others to feel secure. We find our security in the simple act of being. This silence doesn't demand that we retreat from the world permanently. Instead, it asks us to retreat inward long enough to understand that who we are is not defined by external noise. In silence, we learn to trust ourselves. We learn to value the quiet voice of intuition that is often drowned out by the opinions of others. And as we grow comfortable in this space, silence transforms. What once felt empty now feels full of clarity, presence, and an unshakable sense of self. Silence becomes a foundation, a steady ground upon which we stand firm in the face of life's uncertainties. It becomes the source of true security, one that can never be taken away, because it resides within us. Being surrounded by people is often mistaken for connection, but in reality, it is a mirage that can leave us feeling more alone than ever. Society glorifies the idea of being in a crowd, of being liked, admired, and surrounded by friends. Yet how often do we find ourselves in a room full of people only to feel invisible? The crowd, for all its noise and energy, does not necessarily offer understanding or fulfillment. The truth is, the crowd sees only a fragment of who you are, the parts you choose to present, the mask you wear to fit in. In their gaze, you are an idea, a projection, not a whole person. They see the curated version of you, the one that aligns with their expectations, their desires, or their own fears. And in that transaction, the essence of who you truly are can remain unseen and unacknowledged. This is the illusion. We believe that proximity to others equals closeness, that being surrounded equals being valued. But quantity does not equal quality. 100 acquaintances cannot replace the depth of one true connection. The crowd might cheer for your success, but will they sit with you in your silence? They might celebrate your victories, but will they hold space for your struggles? The crowd thrives on appearances, on shared moments that are often fleeting and shallow. Its energy can be intoxicating, drawing you into its rhythm, but when the music stops and the lights dim, who remains? If you have built your sense of self on the applause of the crowd, what happens when the applause fades? To seek understanding and fulfillment in the crowd is to chase a shadow. True connection requires vulnerability, honesty, and depth, qualities that are often lost in the noise of the many. The crowd can provide distraction, but rarely does it provide the nourishment that a soul truly craves. And so the illusion of the crowd becomes clear. It is not a place where we are fully known, but rather a stage where we perform. To step away from the crowd is not to isolate oneself, it is to create space for authentic connections, ones that see you as you are, not as you seem. Solitude is often misunderstood. To many it is seen as a void, an absence of connection, a state to be avoided at all costs. But to a man with no friends or a very small circle, solitude reveals itself not as emptiness, but as richness, a vast, untapped reservoir of depth and clarity. In solitude, he discovers the profound value of simply being alone, unencumbered by the demands or expectations of others. Without the constant pull of external voices, he is free to listen to his own. He learns to hear the quiet whispers of his thoughts, the ebb and flow of his emotions, and the rhythm of his own being. In solitude, there is no one to impress, no performance to maintain. He is free to be exactly as he is, and in that freedom he finds a rare and powerful form of liberation. When a man is alone, he begins to see himself not through the eyes of others, but through his own unfiltered perception. He no longer defines his worth by how he is received by the world, nor does he measure his value by the size of his social circle. Instead, he comes to know himself deeply, exploring the contours of his inner world with curiosity and compassion. Solitude also sharpens his focus. With fewer distractions, he can turn his energy toward pursuits that truly matter to him. His passions, his goals, his personal growth, these become his companions, and they offer a fulfillment that is not contingent on external validation. He learns that his joy and purpose are not things that others give to him, they are things he creates for himself. In solitude, he also discovers the beauty of stillness. Where the world often rushes to fill silence with noise, he allows the quiet to settle. In that quiet, he finds a sense of peace that no amount of social interaction can replicate. It is a peace born from knowing that he needs nothing outside of himself to feel whole. This is not to say that he rejects companionship altogether. On the contrary, his relationships, however few, are imbued with authenticity and depth. Because he does not rely on others to complete him. He approaches connection from a place of abundance, rather than need. His solitude has taught him the strength of standing alone. And from that strength he can build bonds that are genuine and enduring. Solitude, then, is not a punishment or a deficiency, it is a gift. It is the space in which a man comes to understand his true nature, free from the weight of external approval. It is the foundation upon which he builds a life of meaning, purpose, and inner peace. In solitude, he finds his power. True freedom begins when we release ourselves from the chains of seeking validation from others. For much of our lives, we are conditioned to look outward for approval, a nod from a friend, a like on social media, a pat on the back from a colleague. These small affirmations become the currency of our self-worth, and we trade pieces of ourselves to accumulate them. But at what cost? When we live for validation, we become performers in someone else's play. Every action, every decision, every word is carefully curated to elicit approval, to avoid criticism, to fit into a mold that isn't truly ours. We mold ourselves to meet the expectations of others, even when it means suppressing our true desires, our unique voice, and our authentic self. Over time, this need for external validation creates a prison, a gilded one, perhaps, but a prison nonetheless. The truth is, validation from others is fleeting. It is a fickle thing, subject to the ever-changing opinions, moods, and perceptions of those around us. What pleases someone today may disappoint them tomorrow. When we tie our sense of self-worth to external validation, we place our happiness on shaky ground, vulnerable to the whims of others. Letting go of this need is not easy. It requires us to confront our fears, fear of rejection, fear of being misunderstood, fear of not being enough. But when we step through those fears, we discover a profound truth: we have always been enough. Our worth is not something that others grant us, it is something that exists inherently, independent of outside opinions. To free oneself from validation is to reclaim one's power. It means living authentically, guided by one's own values, passions, and purpose rather than the expectations of others. It means embracing the possibility of being misunderstood or disliked, not as a failure, but as a natural part of being true to oneself. This freedom allows us to act, speak, and create without fear. Decisions are no longer weighed down by the question, what will they think? Instead, they are guided by, what do I truly want? What aligns with who I am? This shift brings a sense of liberation, a lightness that comes from no longer needing to carry the burden of pleasing everyone. In this state of freedom, relationships also transform. When we no longer depend on others for validation, we approach them from a place of wholeness rather than neediness. We can connect authentically, love freely, and support others without seeking something in return. True freedom is not about isolating ourselves from others, but about standing firmly in our own truth, unshaken by their opinions. It is the freedom to live fully, to embrace both our strengths and imperfections without apology. When we no longer seek validation from the world, we find something far greater: our own unshakable sense of self-worth. Self-awareness is the cornerstone of a meaningful and fulfilling life. It begins with a simple yet profound act: befriending oneself. This is not merely about tolerating one's own company, but about genuinely embracing who you are, your thoughts, your emotions, your strengths, and your imperfections. It is through this relationship with oneself that the experience of loneliness is transformed into the richness of peaceful solitude. To be self-aware is to see yourself clearly, free from the distortions of societal expectations or the projections of others. It is about understanding not only your actions but also the motivations and fears behind them. This kind of understanding requires courage, the courage to sit in stillness, to confront the parts of yourself you might have ignored, and to listen to the quiet voice within that often gets drowned out by the noise of the world. In moments of solitude, the mind often feels restless, and the temptation arises to fill the space with distractions, screens, conversations, or tasks. But it is precisely in these quiet moments that self-awareness begins to bloom. The thoughts and emotions that surface are not enemies to be silenced, but messengers bearing truths about your inner life. By embracing these moments, by observing without judgment, you start to uncover who you truly are beneath the roles you play and the masks you wear. This awareness allows you to recognize that loneliness is not an external condition, but an internal experience, a disconnection from yourself. When you bridge that gap through self-awareness, solitude becomes something entirely different. It is no longer a state to be feared, but a sanctuary where you can rest, recharge, and reconnect with your essence. Self-awareness also brings a sense of wholeness. In getting to know yourself deeply, you realize that you are already complete. You no longer seek validation or fulfillment from external sources because you understand that everything you need lies within. This shift from outward seeking to inward knowing is transformative. It replaces longing with contentment and insecurity with confidence. Befriending yourself through self-awareness doesn't mean ignoring your flaws or pretending to have all the answers. On the contrary, it means accepting your imperfections with compassion and seeing them as part of your humanity. It means celebrating your strengths without arrogance and being honest about your weaknesses without shame. In solitude, self-awareness becomes a source of strength. You are no longer afraid to be alone because you know that you are in good company, your own. This inner harmony creates a foundation for navigating the world with grace. It allows you to engage with others from a place of authenticity rather than need, to make choices aligned with your true values, and to find peace even amid life's uncertainties. Through self-awareness, loneliness dissolves, and solitude reveals itself as a gift. It is in this quiet communion with yourself that you find clarity, resilience, and an unshakable sense of self-worth. Self-awareness is not just a foundation, it is the doorway to a life of inner peace and profound freedom. In a world that thrives on noise and busyness, quiet is often misunderstood. To many, silence feels empty, even threatening, a reminder of loneliness or a void to be filled with activity and distraction. Yet, for the secure individual, quiet is not a void but a canvas. It is a space rich with opportunity, a sanctuary where joy and meaning are not only found but cultivated. This joy begins with a shift in perspective. Where others see discomfort, the secure individual sees freedom. Quiet is not something to escape, but something to embrace, a pause in the relentless stream of demands and expectations. In this stillness, they are no longer defined by the roles they play or the opinions of others. They are simply themselves, unfiltered and unburdened. The quiet offers a rare chance to reconnect with the essence of life. Without the distractions of constant noise, they become attuned to subtler, more profound experiences, the way light dances through a window, the rhythm of their own breath, the gentle unfolding of thoughts. These moments, often overlooked, are filled with a quiet beauty that brings a deep sense of fulfillment. More than just beauty, the quiet also reveals truth. In solitude, the secure individual finds clarity. Without the influence of external voices, they can hear their own, what they truly desire, what they truly value, and who they truly are. This clarity is a source of immense joy, because it allows them to live authentically, free from the pull of external expectations. The quiet also becomes a space for creativity and self-discovery. It is in these moments of stillness that the mind begins to wander, to explore, to imagine. Ideas take shape, insights emerge, and connections are made that might have been missed in the noise of everyday life. For the secure individual, this process is not only productive but deeply rewarding. Joy in the quiet is not about isolation, it is about presence. The secure individual does not use solitude as a shield against the world, but as a way to deepen their engagement with it. By finding peace and meaning in their own company, they bring a sense of wholeness to their interactions with others. They are not seeking validation or distraction, but sharing from a place of abundance. This joy is not fleeting. It is not dependent on external circumstances or fleeting pleasures. It is a quiet, steady contentment that arises from within, a recognition that happiness is not something to be chased, but something to be discovered in the here and now. For the secure individual, quiet is not a place of discomfort, but a source of strength. It is a reminder that life's most profound joys are often found not in the loud and the grand, but in the simple and the still. And in embracing the quiet, they find not only joy, but also a deep and enduring sense of peace. Genuine relationships are a rare and beautiful thing. They are not forged in the fires of need or fear, but are cultivated in the fertile soil of authenticity and mutual respect. When a connection arises free of dependence, it becomes a bond rooted in choice rather than necessity, a relationship that enriches rather than defines the individuals within it. Dependence in relationships often stems from insecurity. When we look to others to fill voids within ourselves, we place an undue burden on those connections. The need for validation, reassurance, or a sense of completeness turns relationships into transactions rather than partnerships. This dynamic fosters fear of losing the relationship, fear of rejection, and fear of being alone. In contrast, authentic connection emerges when individuals come together not to complete one another but to complement one another. Such relationships are built on a foundation of self-sufficiency. Each person recognizes their own wholeness and approaches the relationship not as a crutch but as a choice. There is no sense of obligation, no underlying pressure to fulfill unspoken needs. Instead, there is freedom, a space where both people can be fully themselves without fear of judgment or rejection. This freedom is transformative. It allows for honesty, vulnerability, and genuine intimacy. In a connection without dependence, there is no need to mask imperfections or pretend to be someone you're not. The relationship thrives on openness, where both parties feel seen and accepted for who they truly are. Such connections are also resilient. Because they are not built on fragile foundations of need, they are not easily shaken by external challenges. There is a mutual respect that fosters trust and understanding, enabling the relationship to grow and adapt over time. Each individual feels secure enough in themselves to give freely without expecting anything in return. When fear and obligation are absent, relationships become a source of joy rather than a source of anxiety.